Thank you very much, Rakesh. It's really an honor to speak to such a large and sophisticated audience. After Rakesh's introduction, I'm afraid you all are going to be expecting a quite erudite, sophisticated analysis of global trends. And I'll do my best, but I won't meet that billing. I remember when I first met Rakesh when we were both diplomats, I used to hate to have to negotiate with Rakesh because he always could talk circles around me. He knew the issues so much better than I do. To keep it simple, I thought I might just talk about two countries that challenge the strategic stability in the Indo-Pacific region. One of the countries is a country that I've been following my entire career since I was a junior diplomat, a country that's been problematic during that entire time. The other country is a country that I think most of you have been following one way or another, certainly any of you who are in the strategic field of business. So the two countries, as you might expect, that are challenging the strategic stability in the region are North Korea and China. In the case of North Korea, the challenge currently is sub-regional. It's limited to Northeast Asia, but it's becoming trans-Pacific as North Korea works to develop an intercontinental ballistic missile that could hit the United States. In the case of China, the challenge ranges from Northeast Asia to the South China Sea. Now, looking to Indian colleagues, I'd like to ask if you think the Chinese challenge to strategic stability also extends to the Indian Ocean. So let me start with North Korea, which has been disturbing strategic stability in the Korean Peninsula for decades. They sent commandos south on several occasions to try to assassinate South Korea's president. In one case, missing the president, but killing his wife, the mother of the recently departed president, Park Geun-hye. Seizing a U.S. intelligence gathering ship, the Pueblo, and holding its 83 crew members for 11 months, exploding a bomb in Rangoon to again try to kill the president, missing him but killing several members of his cabinet, infiltrating special forces into South Korea through 13 tunnels under the DMZ and via mini submarines along the coast, provoking the United States by murdering 3 U.S. service members with axes at Panmunjom. There's many more provocations, but you get the picture. While the United States responded to these provocations with shows of force, the provocations never led to a U.S. attack on North Korea. Not since the fighting in the Korean War stopped in 1953. And it's worth pondering this a minute. Why not? Why didn't the United States retaliate? Why didn't the United States use kinetic means to stop the North Korean nuclear program before it was too late? The answer was so as not to spark resumption of the Korean War. And even though the outcome of any such resumption would have been preordained, a victory by the U.S.-South Korean alliance and a probable end to the North Korean state, South Korea would have taken a terrible pounding in the process. Seoul is very close to the 38th parallel, lying within range of hundreds of North Korean long-range artillery. Today, some observers offer the facile argument that North Korea needs nuclear weapons in order to protect itself against the United States. They draw the false conclusion that the United States attacked Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi this century when they did not have nuclear weapons, but did not attack North Korea, which did. But people who draw this lesson overlook all those years of provocations when the United States did not attack non-nuclear armed North Korea. What protects North Korea, what protected them then and what protects them now, is geography, not nuclear weapons. But North Korean leaders have drawn the wrong lesson, convincing themselves that they need a nuclear deterrent to protect their regime. And not just any nukes. They want ones that can hit the continental United States. So they're developing both submarine-launched ballistic missiles and intercontinental ballistic missiles. They're also developing intermediate-range ballistic missiles that presumably are intended to be able to hit Guam, the U.S. territory in the Pacific. It doesn't. The Musudan that was successfully tested last June after 4 failures flew a lofted trajectory that's the equivalent range of 3,000 kilometers. Not a bad feat for this impoverished small nation. But Guam lies 3,400 kilometers away from North Korea. So Musudan doesn't hit Guam. The sea-launched ballistic missiles present a new kind of challenge. Presumably, they could sneak up to Seattle or San Francisco off the coast and threaten from offshore. Now, they're very noisy, these submarines. They're diesel-powered. The United States could detect and track them, but the concern is that they would enter Russian waters where the United States couldn't go in, and then they would travel up the coast of Russia and then scoot across to Alaska and come down and threaten from there. And there's also a concern that they could send a missile over the United States and explode it above the United States, and the electromagnetic pulse would knock out all U.S. telecommunications and electricity. Well, it wouldn't. It wouldn't do that. I'm just mentioning it because I gave a talk last week, and the first question somebody asked was, what about electromagnetic pulse? So just to preempt anyone from here asking that question, I'm going to tell you it doesn't work. The intercontinental ballistic missile program is making great strides. Within 4 years, North Korea probably would be able to have one that could reliably hit the United States. Just this month, well, no, now it's March. Last month, February 12th, North Korea launched a Musudan equivalent that had 2 significant new developments. One, it used a solid fuel motor. Solid fuel means you don't have to spend time fueling it. It's already fueled. You can launch it very quickly. The other thing, it was on a large transport erector launcher that had tank-type treads. It could go off-road, making it much harder to detect and preempt. So a North Korean ICBM would be a game changer, many people say. I disagree. I'm in the minority. I don't think an ICBM would be a game changer, even though it could hit Seattle. The reason is because the danger that North Korea presents is already clear and present. It already can hit all of South Korea with its nodongs, most of Japan, and American bases in both countries. So it already presents a strategic threat. Also, even though North Korea ICBM could get up in the air and come back down toward the United States, chances are pretty good that U.S. ballistic missile defense could knock it out of the sky before it would fall down. Missile defense is not 100% capable of hitting any incoming, but a few incoming North Korean missiles, it stands a better than even chance of hitting. So if you're if you're in the United States, you'd want 100% probability of knocking them down, but if you're North Korea, you don't like the odds too well that the likelihood is they're going to be knocked out. So these are some of the reasons I don't think it's a strategic game changer for North Korea to have an ICBM, but it's a political game changer because nobody in the United States wants to be vulnerable to a North Korean nuclear-armed missile. North Korea thinks, I guess, that if they could hit the United States, they could decouple the United States from South Korea and Japan. The idea that if they could threaten the United States, then the United States would stop protecting its allies. This is the decoupling concept. Well, it's not going to work, and all you have to do is look at how the United States continued to maintain a security guarantee to its European allies during all the times of the Cold War when the Soviet Union could hit the United States with ICBMs, and not just with 1 or 2, but with thousands of them. The United States never wavered in its commitment to its European allies. So Kim Jong-un's strategy is not going to work. Now, getting to the second problem. China bears partial responsibility for North Korea's provocations. It's not that China supplied North Korea with the nuclear knowledge to make weapons. They didn't. North Korea mostly developed it by itself. It got a trainer kit from the Soviet Union for civilian nuclear energy and then used it for weapons. But what Chinese firms, at least, have supplied North Korea with a lot of the material and parts for its missile program. So China bears a responsibility. Plus, the Chinese are responsible for why there is a North Korea today, because were it not for Chinese forces in October 1950 that saved North Korea from General Douglas MacArthur, Korea would be unified today under Seoul leadership, and a much better place it would be. China also challenges Indo-Pacific strategic stability in a different way. Like all nuclear weapon states, it's upgrading its nuclear forces. In the next 10 years, it will probably double the number of ICBMs that could hit the United States. Today, it might have about 50 of them that can hit the US. That'll double probably. And China has a second strike capability already because a lot of its forces are hidden in tunnels in mountains that the United States can't see and therefore can't take out. But China is supplementing its second strike capability with a sea-based deterrent. It's got submarines it's been working on for a long time. It's having some trouble getting those submarines operational. It's got a lot of trouble with command and control for those submarines, but it's getting there. Now, many analysts already believe that China and the United States have a condition of mutual nuclear vulnerability. Because China's got the 50 that can hit the United States got thousands can hit China, they can inflict a lot of damage one on the other, and so there's a mutual vulnerability. Some say, well, that promotes stability because it balances each other out. It's like the United States and Soviet Union, the mutual assured destruction that kept them from going to war for 60 years. But having a nuclear deterrent might also contribute to Chinese aggression, the instability-stability paradox. And we see Chinese being more aggressive in the South China Sea and vis-a-vis Japan over the islands that China claims that Japan occupies. And China's nuclear force modernization worries Japan as it is engaged with this Chinese behavior. In addition to the nuclear force modernization, Japan and Australia and other countries worry about China's growing conventional anti-access area denial capabilities and whether they might someday preclude America's ability to come to the defense of its regional allies. So for some, the answer to these challenges to strategic stability is for other states that feel threatened by Chinese or North Korean nuclear weapons to fight fire with fire, to get nuclear weapons of their own. This is a theme in South Korea and in Japan. It's not a theme of the government, but a lot of people in South Korea, a lesser number in Japan, think that they should have their own nuclear weapons. And there's some other people that think this through. And last year, one of those people was named Donald Trump, who in 3 interviews a year ago said that, well, maybe it'd be a good idea if Japan and South Korea got nuclear weapons. They could defend themselves that way. He said this 3 times in 3 different interviews. Later, he insisted that he never said it. Well, it's on tape. I mean, it's pretty clear he said it. But, you know, when he says, I never said it, and he insists he never said it, it means he never believed it. It means it wasn't in his head. It was just some throwaway line to try to get them to pay more for the U.S. Supplied defense. And he met with some Republican senators who are pretty smart. And I'm sure that they told him, this is a really dumb idea. Because if, say, Japan goes nuclear, it won't stop there. You know, if Japan goes nuclear, you can bet the next day South Korea will start its own nuclear weapons program. They don't want to be left out, and probably vice versa. Because nuclear proliferation doesn't end with one state. I mean, India found that out itself when they got nuclear weapons to to be able to match China in some way, and then Pakistan got them. So there's this cascade effect. There's other reasons why it's a really dumb idea, and I'm glad that Trump doesn't say it anymore. But saying it wasn't inconsequential, because saying it undermined the credibility of the U.S. extended deterrent, because it gave the Japanese and the South Koreans the idea that, you know, Trump isn't really going to be there for us. We might need to think about other options. Well, as president, it seems clear to me he's not going to say this again. And I don't think South Korea or Japan or Taiwan are going to go nuclear. I think they will remain latent nuclear powers. And by the way, there's a good book out on this subject, Asia's Latent Nuclear Powers, written by Mark Fitzpatrick. I didn't bring any to sell, but you can look it up online. These countries realize that going nuclear would be far too costly, not just economic terms, but strategic terms. They would be inviting a preemptive attack. So meanwhile, Japan in particular will continue to promote nuclear disarmament and transparency as a diplomatic tool to both contain Beijing's nuclear buildup, while at the same time, Japan will be relying on U.S. extended deterrence. I don't think Trump either will want to reposition U.S. tactical nuclear weapons in South Korea. Papa Bush pulled the nuclear weapons out from South Korea in 1991 because they were hard to protect. They didn't add any strategic value. They created political divisiveness in South Korea, created a lot of anti-Americanism. So they got taken out, and all those reasons still are valid for why they shouldn't go back in. And I think Trump, at least his cabinet members, realize that. I'm going to talk about in a minute. I'm going to just end on that note. Otherwise, the U.S. response, for example, in response to China's, okay, I've written it A2AD. That means anti-access area denial. In response to China's A2AD challenges, the U.S. Department of Defense has developed the concept of air-sea battle, which would entail strikes on the Chinese mainland early in a conflict in order to eliminate China's kill chain of radars, command and control centers, and missile sites. Now, they changed the name of this to the Joint Concept for Access and Maneuver in the Global Commons. I guess that sounds not as threatening, even though the concept is pretty controversial because of its escalatory potential. But it's a means to try to signal to American allies and potential adversaries that America's extended deterrence will not be undermined. Both President Obama and President Trump have made statements saying that the United States will help Japan by protecting the disputed Senkaku Diaoyu Islands. That helps provide reassurance. The United States has also provided South Korea with reassurance by sending nuclear-capable B-52s and B-2s to fly near the border with North Korea. They're not nuclear-armed, but they're nuclear-capable to make the point. Now, I was asked shortly before dinner by a couple of new friends to talk about what is Trump going to do, in Asia to help maintain strategic stability. And one of your numbers told me that since I'm from Washington, I'm close to the horse's mouth, and I probably know. Well, I don't have a foggiest clue of what Trump is going to do. I sometimes feel I'm closer to the other part of the horse. But it seems to me that American foreign policy in general is emerging to be bipolar. Bipolar, I know, it sounds like a mental disease, and it kind of is. What I mean is that you're going to have two poles in the administration. You're going to have President Donald Trump talking tough, mainly talking to his constituency, his base, and writing tweets that are very controversial and aggressive. And it's going to really satisfy his base. Man, they're going to feel good about that. But meanwhile, the wise people that he has appointed to run the government, Rex Tillerson at the Department of State, and James Mattis at the Department of Defense, and Pompeo at the Central Intelligence Agencies, these are responsible adults. And they realize that America foreign policy can't just be shifted overnight, that America has ongoing commitments like extended deterrence, and they're not going to change. The pivot to Asia that was launched not by Obama, but actually by George W. Bush, is going to continue. And there's going to be a lot of contradiction between Trump's tweets and the actual maintenance, the actual implementation of American foreign policy. Now, I'm an optimist, so I'm going to, just for tonight, put my money on the adults running the agencies of government. And they have an ally in the White House. The new national security advisors, and by the way, national security advisors are very important people. We're really lucky whenever we have a former national security advisor in our midst. So the new national security advisor is a friend of mine, a friend of IISS. H.R. McMaster was one of our colleagues for a year, and he's been a consulting fellow. And he's a smart, responsible, pragmatic person, and already we can see that he's trying to instill discipline and a sense of responsibility in the National Security Council staff at the White House. So I'm going to leave you with that optimistic note and hope that with such responsible people in places of important positions that the United States will continue to help to maintain the strategic stability in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.